I should have known the second I saw her marching across my lawn in those neon pink Crocs that trouble was coming. Jolene Raskin, our HOA president, neighborhood busybody, and full-time nuisance, had her tablet clutched tight against her chest like it contained national secrets. She didn't even knock. Just stood there glaring at me while I was hosing down my driveway. "Elliot," she barked, like I was a dog who'd peed on her porch. "That boat of yours is in violation of Section 14, Paragraph C of the HOA bylaws. No recreational vehicles stored in view from the street." "You've been warned." I looked over at my boat, a modest 20-footer named Second Wind, parked neatly on the side of my driveway behind the gate. I'd even built a privacy screen. You could barely see the trailer tires unless you were actively snooping, which clearly Jolene had been. "I'm not storing it in view. It's behind the fence," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You can see the top of the motor from the road," she snapped, her eyes twitching like she'd just uncovered a felony. "That counts." It didn't. I'd read the bylaws, but I knew Jolene. She didn't care about rules, just power. 2 days later, I got the fine. $300, along with a typed letter signed by her and the 2 other HOA board members who were too spineless to stand up to her. I appealed. They denied it, of course, so I read the bylaws again. Then I read the city ordinances. And that's when I found the golden ticket. There was nothing in the HOA rules or local laws that said I couldn't legally park my boat on the public street, as long as it wasn't blocking a driveway or fire hydrant. So guess where Second Wind ended up the next Saturday morning? Right in front of Jolene Raskin's house. She came out in a floral robe with curlers in her hair, holding a coffee mug that said, "One Boss." The look on her face when she saw my boat parked squarely in front of her manicured hedges. "Priceless? Elliot, what the hell is this?" I pulled the boat cover off slowly like I was unwrapping a gift. "Oh, hey Jolene, just following the rules," I said. "City ordinance says I can park any registered vehicle on the street for up to 72 hours. Figured it was better than leaving it in view on my own property, right?" She turned a shade of red I didn't think human skin could manage. "You move it now or I'm calling the police." I shrugged. "Go ahead. I've got all the documentation right here." She stormed inside, slamming her door so hard a garden gnome toppled over on her porch. I didn't move the boat, not that day, not for 3 full days. And when I finally did, I brought it back the next weekend and the weekend after that. By the 3rd weekend, Jolene stopped pretending to be surprised. She'd taken to watering her front yard in silence, glaring at the boat like it was a stray animal that refused to leave. I didn't wave. I just adjusted the trailer's wheel locks and made sure the registration was clearly visible in the window. 72 hours. That's what the ordinance allowed, and I wasn't wasting a minute of it. It wasn't about the boat anymore. It was about control, and she didn't have it. On Monday evening, something shifted. I came out after work to rotate the trailer tire's routine maintenance and noticed a pink citation envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. Not from the city. The HOA. Again. The fine was now $500, citing community disruption and creating an eyesore. This time, they'd added a threat. Failure to comply could result in legal escalation, including a lien against property. I took a photo of the notice with my phone, front and back. Then I walked it into the house, scanned it, and added it to the folder titled HOA Harassment. It had 13 documents in it so far. I wasn't the only one. That night, I walked 2 blocks down to Mike and Janine's place. They were quiet folks, retired teachers, both with a fondness for gardening and zero tolerance for nonsense. Janine brought out lemonade, and we sat on their porch while I explained what had happened. Mike listened, then pulled out a manila envelope of his own. "She tried to shake down Janine for planting lavender near the sidewalk," he said. "Claimed it attracted bees and posed a safety hazard." Janine rolled her eyes. "She's been on a power trip ever since that last election. The problem is no one else wants the job. She's got a little fiefdom and she's been running it unchecked." I tapped the folder on my lap. "I think it's time we change that." Mike leaned forward. "You want to run for the board, not me," I said. "But I think we can find someone who's not trying to micromanage people's lives. Fair rules, transparency, basic decency." Over the next 2 weeks, I started knocking on doors, not campaigning, just talking, finding out who else had been given fines that didn't match the bylaws. I brought copies of the actual rules with me, highlighted. What I found was worse than I expected. One neighbor had been fined $800 for unauthorized paint color. The kicker: the paint had been pre-approved by a previous board. Another was threatened with a lien for putting up a solar panel, perfectly legal under state law. And 3 houses had received final notices for weeds that didn't exist. I asked to see the photos the HOA had sent as evidence. All 3 had been taken from odd angles, close-up shots that made blades of grass look like overgrowth. "We've tried fighting it," one man told me, "but they always deny the appeals. It's like the board just rubber stamps whatever Jolene wants." I asked if anyone had ever attended the board meetings. "They don't tell us when they are. Minutes never get posted," he said. I asked once and Jolene told me they were internal administrative sessions. That was illegal. HOA by law have to provide notice of meetings, allow attendance, and publish minutes. I knew this because my sister was a municipal attorney downstate. I called her that night. "You're telling me they've been issuing fines without due process, holding secret meetings and threatening liens?" she asked. "Elliot, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen." "I don't want to sue, I just want them to stop." "You may not have a choice. This is abuse of authority, plain and simple. If they've been collecting money under false pretenses, that's fraud. Fraud." That word stuck with me. The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the state's Department of Consumer Protection. I included scanned copies of every fine, every fabricated citation, and a list of residents who'd been affected. I also sent a copy to the city attorney's office. Then I did one more thing. I filed a request under the HOA's own charter for a full accounting of the association's finances. They were required to provide it within 30 days. Within a week, the fallout began. First, the board sent out an emergency notice of a special meeting at the community clubhouse. That was a first. They'd never called a special meeting before. No agenda, just a vague note about community concerns. I showed up early. So did Mike and Janine, and about 35 other residents, many of whom had never attended anything HOA related in their lives. Jolene walked in 10 minutes late, flanked by the 2 other board members, Ken and Lisa, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She took the podium, cleared her throat, and started with a stiff smile. "We've heard your concerns and want to assure everyone that the board has always acted in the best interest of the community." Someone in the back coughed loudly. "We're aware of some complaints regarding the citation process, and we are reviewing our procedures." I stood up. "When were the last board elections held?" She paused. "We follow the standard term schedule, which is what, exactly?" She glanced at her tablet. 2-year terms." "Then why haven't there been elections in over 3 years?" Murmurs rippled through the room. Jolene's smile faltered. "We postponed the last one due to the pandemic. The bylaws don't allow postponement without a vote from the membership. There was no vote." Ken looked down at the table. Lisa bit her lip. Another hand went up from the front row. "Where's the financial report?" "We submitted a request last week." Jolene's voice tightened. "We're compiling it." "You're required to provide it within 30 days of request," I said. "That deadline is next Friday." "We're working on it," she said, now visibly sweating. "I also contacted the Department of Consumer Protection," I added, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "They've opened an investigation into HOA practices, including unlawful fines and misuse of funds." That did it. Ken stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. "I didn't sign off on any of that," he said, turning to Jolene. "You told us everything was fine, that we were covered." Lisa looked panicked. "You said the legal stuff was just a formality." Jolene's face had gone pale. "I think it's time for a recall vote," Janine said quietly. Mike stood up beside her. I second that. The room erupted. People were nodding, clapping, some even cheering. Jolene tried to regain control, banging a gavel on the podium, but no one listened. Within 10 minutes, a petition was circulating. By the end of the week, we had enough signatures to force a special election. Jolene resigned 3 days later, citing personal reasons. She left behind a laptop full of incomplete financial records, half of which didn't match the bank statements we eventually obtained. The city attorney's office sent an investigator. So did the state. Turns out, some of the fines collected had never been deposited into the HOA account. They'd been funneled into a separate PayPal account managed under Jolene's name. That was enough for charges. She was arrested twice, once for fraud, once for obstruction when she tried to delete files. Her trial is next month. In the meantime, we elected a new board. Mike is the president now. Janine handles communications, and me. I run the compliance committee, making sure no one ever gets fined for nonsense again. As for Second Wind, I built a proper carport in the back. Fully screened. Fully compliant. But sometimes, just for old time's sake, I still park it on the street, right across from where Jolene used to live. The house is up for sale now. No offers yet. The for sale sign in front of Jolene's house stood crooked by the time the third open house was canceled. Potential buyers weren't too thrilled to learn the former HOA president had been arrested for financial misconduct, and word about the investigation had spread beyond the neighborhood. A local news segment aired a 2-minute piece on it, just enough to make sure nobody forgot. I hadn't planned to stay involved in HOA politics after the dust settled, but the deeper we dug into the records Jolene left behind, the more disturbing things got. One file, buried in a folder labeled discretionary, contained a spreadsheet tracking dozens of fines issued over 2 years. The amounts collected didn't match deposits in the HOA account. At least 20 homes had paid penalties that simply disappeared from the books. We brought in a forensic accountant paid for out of the emergency reserve fund, which miraculously, Jolene hadn't touched. Within a week, he confirmed nearly $12,000 had gone unaccounted for. The money trail led to 2 personal bank accounts, both in Jolene's name. When we turned that over to the district attorney's office, things escalated fast. Detectives showed up with a warrant and seized the desktop computer from her house, along with 3 boxes of documents she hadn't turned over. They found printed invoices for fake landscaping services, most of which had never been performed. One of the fake companies had been registered under her cousin's name in another state. It wasn't just administrative abuse anymore, it was organized fraud. The DA's office added charges for wire fraud and falsifying business records. Her arraignment was quiet, held without press, but someone on the courthouse staff leaked the case summary online. That's how we found out she'd also forged 2 board member signatures to authorize a transfer of HOA funds into a private escrow account. Meanwhile, the new board, Mike, Janine, myself, and 2 others set up a public audit process. We held meetings every other Thursday, open to all residents. Everything was transparent: expenditures, citations, decisions. We even had a whiteboard in the clubhouse listing which homes were being reviewed for compliance and why. No more mystery fines. No more power games. Still, not everyone was eager to move on. One evening, I was locking up the clubhouse when I noticed a white sedan idling at the end of the parking lot. It was almost 9 and the place had cleared out. I didn't recognize the car, but I caught a glimpse of the driver. Jolene's daughter, Lauren. She'd moved out years ago, but she was back now, rumor had it, to help her mother with legal defense. The next morning, the new compliance officer, Terrence, called me. "Did you approve a citation for 312 Hosser?" "No." "Why?" "Someone slipped a fine under their door last night." "It's on fake HOA letterhead. Claims a violation for excessive backyard lighting." We met at the residence. The homeowners, a young couple with twin toddlers, were rattled. The letter was almost identical to the old citations down to the font and layout. but it wasn't from us. The board had never issued it. I took a photo and went straight to the police station. An officer from the Financial Crimes Unit took the report. They'd already flagged Jolene's family for potential interference after her initial arrest, and this confirmed their suspicions. A judge issued a no-contact order that afternoon, barring her and any family member from distributing materials related to the HOA. We installed cameras at the entrances of the clubhouse and began logging every visitor. The board also created a digital reporting system so residents could submit concerns without fear of retaliation. The next surprise came from the insurance company. Turns out, our HOA had a fidelity bond, a kind of insurance that covers theft by board members. The new treasurer filed a claim. After a month-long verification process, we recovered just over $15,000. It wasn't everything Jolene had taken, but it was enough to refund every homeowner who'd been wrongfully fined. We hand-delivered the checks. People cried. One man said it restored his faith in the neighborhood. Another told me he was going to use the money to finally fix the cracked walkway he'd been fined for, even though the initial claim had been false. The best part: the recovered funds weren't just handed out quietly. We made a public record of the repayments, listing each citation and the amount refunded. Transparency wasn't just a buzzword anymore, it was our new standard. A month later, Jolene's trial began. The prosecution's case was rock solid. They had bank statements, forged documents, digital trails, and even a voice recording from one of Jolene's old board meetings. Ken, one of the former members, had come forward with a backup drive that Jolene had asked him to wipe. He didn't. On it were emails instructing him to just sign and I'll handle the rest. The jury didn't take long. She was convicted on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, and unlawful use of HOA authority. The sentence: 7 years with eligibility for parole after 4. After the verdict, the courthouse steps were lined with reporters. I didn't talk to them, but I saw the story online later that night. The headline read, "Local HOA president sentenced in major fraud case, homeowners take back control." Despite everything, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved. The kind of relief that comes after holding your breath for too long. That weekend, I took the boat out for the first time in months. No drama, no surveillance, just open water, a cooler of sandwiches, and the kind of silence you don't realize you've missed until it wraps around you. When I got back, I found a note in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. Thank you for standing up. The neighborhood feels like home again. No signature, no need. We'd started holding seasonal community events, barbecues, volunteer cleanup days, even a Halloween decorating contest. The clubhouse that used to be locked more than it was used now hosted chess nights and yoga classes. People had stopped glancing over their shoulders every time they planted a new flower or bought a new mailbox. The HOA was no longer a looming threat. It was exactly what it was supposed to be: a tool for maintaining the neighborhood, not controlling it. Lauren eventually moved away. The house Jolene once ruled from sat empty for months. No one wanted it, not at market price, not with that history. Eventually, the bank foreclosed. Now it's being remodeled by a couple with a rescue dog and a toddler who leaves sidewalk chalk drawings on the driveway. Every once in a while, I still walk by it, not to gloat, just to remember, because neighborhoods aren't built from fences and bylaws, they're built from trust. And when people remember they have a voice, no amount of fake fines or neon crocs can silence them. By spring, the neighborhood had changed so much it was almost unrecognizable in the best way. Kids played basketball in driveways without anyone snapping photos or sending citations. People started painting their homes again in colors they actually liked, not the 5 muted tones Jolene once deemed aesthetic. Even the annual yard sale, which used to be restricted to HOA-approved tables and signage, turned into a full-blown community block party with food trucks, live music, and someone's uncle selling homemade hot sauce out of the back of his truck. But the peace didn't last long. 3 weeks after Jolene's conviction, the new treasurer, Dana, called me in the middle of dinner. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You need to see this." I met her at the community clubhouse 20 minutes later. She had a stack of folders spread out across the long table, her laptop open with a spreadsheet on the screen. "Found it when I was reviewing the annual insurance report. There's a secondary policy here, one nobody ever mentioned. It's under the HOA's name, but it lists a different mailing address than ours." "Where?" She handed me a printed document. The address was for a P.O. box in Clearwater, Florida. "There's more," she said, flipping open another folder. "This policy isn't just for property damage or liability. It's for construction bonds, large ones, and the premiums. They were paid quarterly using HOA funds, but we don't have any construction projects, exactly." We pulled the last 5 years of bank statements and started cross-referencing the payment amounts. Every 3 months, a transfer marked Bond Premium Infrastructure Reserve had been authorized. Over time, it added up to nearly $40,000. What was Jolene doing with this? I think she was laundering it, routing legitimate-looking payments through a shell contractor. "Look at the payee name." She turned her laptop toward me. The check images were blurry, but the recipient's name was consistent: CWS Development Consulting. I leaned back in my chair. "That's not a company we've ever hired." I checked the Secretary of State's registry. "It was incorporated 4 years ago. Guess who the registered agent is?" I didn't need to guess. We reported it the next day to the assistant district attorney handling Jolene's conviction. He looked genuinely surprised when we walked into his office with a binder full of documents. "I thought we'd already seen the worst of it," he said, flipping through the financials. "You haven't," Dana replied. "She was using this to embezzle from our infrastructure reserve. The board never approved these payments. Jolene authorized them alone." A week later, a federal investigator from the Department of Housing and Urban Development was assigned to the case. Turns out, that shell company had also applied for a government redevelopment grant under our community's name without the board's knowledge. The application had been denied, but merely applying under false pretenses was a federal offense. The investigator asked us to keep it quiet while they built a case. In the meantime, we froze all outgoing payments pending full internal audits. We also passed a motion requiring dual signatures for any expense over $500. It wasn't just about accountability anymore, it was about safeguarding the community from any future abuse. 2 months later, Jolene was back in court, this time facing federal charges for wire fraud, misrepresentation in a federal application, and misappropriation of community development funds. Her court-appointed attorney tried to argue diminished capacity due to stress, but the prosecution had her emails, phone logs, and the original grant application with her digital signature. This time, the courtroom was full. Neighbors packed into the gallery. Mike wore a tie for the first time since retirement. Janine brought a notebook and scribbled everything. I sat in the second row, directly behind the prosecution table. When the verdict was read guilty on all counts, Dana quietly reached into her purse and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It was the old spreadsheet that started it all. She didn't say anything. She just slid it across the bench to me and nodded. Jolene's sentence was extended by 12 more years, to be served consecutively with her original term. The judge called her actions a deliberate betrayal of trust that undermined the very foundation of community governance. She didn't speak during sentencing, just stared straight ahead, expression blank. After the hearing, we held a special meeting in the park. No agenda, no votes. Just neighbors gathering with lawn chairs and coolers, trying to exhale after nearly 2 years of chaos. Someone brought a Bluetooth speaker and played old Motown. A few kids ran around with glow sticks. It felt like we were finally breathing again. Dana walked over holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. "You think we're finally in the clear?" she asked. I watched a couple of teenagers chalking hopscotch on the sidewalk, something that would have triggered a citation not long ago. "Yeah," I said, I think we are. The next board meeting was different. We'd installed a new projector and set up a live stream feed so members who couldn't attend could still watch and vote. We passed bylaw amendments that protected residents from unilateral enforcement actions, required transparent budgeting with quarterly reports, and created term limits for board members. No one objected. By summer, we had a volunteer landscaping crew, a neighborhood watch group that actually helped people instead of spying on them, and a shared tool shed residents could use for free. The HOA wasn't just a regulatory body anymore, it was a real community resource. We even got a letter from the mayor thanking us for setting a new example in civic accountability. The city had started using our case as a training scenario for new neighborhood associations. Apparently, we were the cautionary tale that ended in a comeback story, and the boat still mine. Still named Second Wind. These days, I keep it in the back, tucked neatly behind a cedar-covered carport I built with Dana's husband, fully permitted, fully legal. But every once in a while, when the weather's nice and I've got 72 hours to spare, I still hitch it up and park it on the street, not in front of Jolene's old house. That's sold to a young couple from Oregon who had no idea what had gone down here. Their good folks teach art classes at the rec center and host trivia nights. No reason to drag them into old battles. Instead, I park it in front of the clubhouse right next to the sign that now reads, Homeowners Association of Fairgrove by the People, for the People. Sometimes kids climb up onto the trailer and pretend it's a pirate ship. I don't stop them. Because around here, we finally learned the difference between rules and community, and we're not forgetting it again.